Well, good deal. Well, it's 10:31, so we can get started.
Except we lost one of our panelists, didn't we? Is she gone? Is she there?
I looked down and she's gone. It's 10:31 and we're still waiting now.
Yeah.
I will get. She'll get back on here in a second. Well, I'll welcome everyone to this is the Healthcare Startup Support Getting Started and How session starting now at 10:30 with Claire Aldrich and Steve Gingrich. I'm going to go ahead and introduce both of them, and then we see her now. You see Claire as well, and we'll take it from there. So first things first, my name is Hubert Zaitchik. I run Health Wildcatters. In case you don't know how to spell this, I'm in the right backdrop today. In Dallas as well, so we work with healthcare startups. And then our panelists are Claire Aldrich and Steve Gingrich. And Claire's the Associate Vice President for Commercialization and Business Development at UT Southwestern. Before that, she was with Remeditex Ventures, which was a local biotech fund. And she has over 20 years of experience facilitating the translation of scientific discoveries into patient and commercial benefits. So Claire has a long track record of doing that. I feel a kinship with her on that. I guess we all are in that space. I feel like we talk to the researchers, but we also can talk to the people that can make the businesses happen, that bring the cures. Claire joined, you don't say here, Claire, when you joined, but a couple of years ago, right?
I've been back at UT Southwestern for about a year and a half.
Year and a half, okay. So Claire was at UT Southwestern, went to Remeditex, now she's back, and is now at the helm of the department of the tech transfer and business development department. She has a PhD from Duke in immunology and program genetics, and a BS from A&M. And then Steve Gingrich, up here on the side, is at UTD. He's got an illustrious career as an entrepreneur and author of several books. I need to catch on articles on information technology. He's an advisor, investor, co-founder of several startups or healthcare industry ventures. He currently serves as senior advisor to VP of Research, Dr. Joseph Pancrazio, butchered the name, at UT Dallas. And then my introduction also includes a shout out to the C1 Innovation Center by Blue Cross Blue Shield, who is a sponsor of the healthcare track during Dallas Startup Week. This is the fourth session of the healthcare track with 5 total sessions. Yesterday we heard from Michael Gorton, the co-founder of Teladoc, and then we had a panel of healthcare startups, what they did right, what they did wrong. And we finished up with a healthcare funding panel with 3 VCs, all local, that invest in healthcare ventures. So we thought that one of the ways to at least get us started here would be to talk a little bit about some examples of companies that have come through your shops, Steve and Claire. And then let's also continue to remember that we're here, given the title, to give as much information as we can on what type of resources one can expect to encounter, especially in your realms directly, or other resources that you know about. So I think we'll kick it off with Claire. So Claire, if you can pick, I mean, there's several recent successes at UT Southwestern. I'll let you pick one. I think we discussed OncoNano, but there's also Taysha. So tell us a little bit about how that came together, and let's also keep in mind the component about how that could be relevant for someone that's listening right now as an entrepreneur or scientist.
I think for both Taysha Gene Therapies and OncoNano, which are two companies that are in really that early growth phase of that innovation pathway compared to some of our more mature ones like Peloton or Reata, those companies, and I think all of the companies that we try to spin out, the first thing that they're trying to do is to actually solve a problem in the marketplace. And OncoNano is a fantastic story because it started with a surgeon, a head and neck oncology surgeon, Baran Sumer, who had this recognition through his training that when he was doing the surgery for head and neck cancers, if he got all of the tumor, then the patient had a good outcome. But if he missed any of the tumor, then that tumor recurred and the patient's outcome then reflected that recurrence, and the outcome was not as favorable for the patient. And so the problem he wanted to solve that he saw in his clinical practice was, how do I make sure that I'm seeing all the tumor that's there? And so when he came to UT Southwestern to continue his training and to start his full practice in head and neck oncology, he partnered with a chemist, Jingming Gao, a polymer chemist, who really focused on how can we use chemistry to identify the tumor and whether or not to identify the edges of the tumor. And so that was the first problem they tried to solve, and they had a couple of attempts that didn't work as well as the platform that ultimately became the foundation for OncoNano. But it was that combination of the basic scientist working with a clinician, and the clinician having the true problem that they were trying to solve in their clinical practice and working with someone to help them solve that. So they came together and they developed a nanoparticle that actually is very sensitive to the change in pH that happens within a tumor. And tumors end up being more acidic than the rest of your normal tissue because it's got higher metabolism going on in there. So more, protons are being made so that the pH is a little bit lower. So they designed a particle that disintegrates in that lower pH, but stays together in the regular pH of the body. And the very first thing they did is they filled that with a fluorescent marker that uses the camera that is already in the surgical suite. So it didn't require any new equipment for the clinician. And I think in addition to solving a problem that's a clinical problem, that's a real clinical problem for our healthcare system, the other part is trying to make sure the barrier to entry is not too high. And by using a camera that's already in the surgical suite, it didn't require additional equipment purchases or training or anything like that. So physicians were much more likely to be able to adopt it without too much trouble. And so they took that product into the clinic. They're now in phase 2 clinical trials, and they've actually been able to show the tumor in real time while the surgeon is in there. And they've identified a number of tumors in some of these surgeries that they've done in head and neck cancer, breast cancer, prostate cancer that had not been known before the surgery. So it hadn't been identified through pathology or any other imaging, PET scanning, anything like that prior to the surgery. So it's been great from that perspective. And now they're using that as a platform. Now that they know that they have something that can disintegrate within the tumor, now they're looking at loading it with therapeutic molecules. So things that will turn on the immune system, or things that would otherwise have systemic toxicity. But if you can localize that toxicity right to the tumor, then you're going to get the potent killing at the tumor without, that potent toxicity to the whole body. And one of the other great things about OncoNano is they just recently received their 3rd CPRIT award. So the Cancer Prevention Research Institute of Texas has now supported them over $30 million because of the value of the work that they're doing. And so that's been something that has really allowed them to accelerate their development and de-risk things so that they become a better investable opportunity for our local investment community. So that's another key thing, is how can you get some of those dollars that allow you to de-risk things, and certainly de-risk things without taking any dilution, so non-dilutive funding. And that is very helpful, knowing that healthcare is such an expensive place to take things into the market.
Great. That's a great story. It kind of reminds me of, I don't know, remember playing around with caged compounds that
Mhm.
could be unlocked. So this is almost like a pH caged compound. Maybe that's what you call it still. My
Yes.
science is 10 or so years.
My science is very outdated as well. One of the things that's the key component of this is it's either an on or an off. So it's either a nanoparticle that's intact or it completely disintegrates, which a lot of the other particles that have been tried in the past were more of a gradient. They kind of slowly disintegrated. And this is, because it's on off, it's much more sensitive to the environment of the tumor.
That's a great example. So I just want to get at least one example out. So Steve, let's kick it over to you, and why don't you give us an example or two of some startups that have come through recently?
Sure. And apologies for the off-camera mug drinking, although I see you doing the same, Hubert. I've got a little bit of a sore throat. I'm nursing. I think it's allergies today, but just real quick, kind of, I think one of the things to bear in mind that most everyone on the call knows is at UT Dallas and UT Southwestern Medical Center, while both members of the University of Texas family kind of have a sort of a different set of offerings, so to speak, from an academic perspective, certainly in research perspective. And so, we've got 8 schools at UT Dallas. At least 5 of them, probably all of them, if I dug a little deeper, have some element of either a center or institute or academic offering associated with healthcare and life sciences broadly. And so just to give you the nature of sort of the vast range of things that we run into, in the business school, we have a top-ranked innovation entrepreneurship academic program. And one of the classes that every student that goes through that program, whether undergraduate or graduate, takes is an introduction to the topic. And in that introduction class, half of the grade essentially comes from a project that you do where you come up with an idea of some kind, and then you create the pitch deck ultimately that you then shape throughout the semester and pitch to a set of judges at the end of the class. It's all in the learning process, not necessarily who wins, so to speak, the final pitch, but there's a little bit of pride at stake. And so we've had some really interesting student-led ventures come out of that activity, from students that are either in our business school or in our computer science school. In fact, one on the computer science side that took that class and went through our accelerator is a young man named James Griffin, who incubated his venture and has kind of pivoted from being more of a services provider for education services to now healthcare services. And he has built a great little team that he recently moved to a new offices because he outgrew us. So super excited for him. On the far end, we have science that is occurring every day, just as Claire was describing. Probably the one that is at least most recently notable is the venture that was announced as having been acquired just last week. I think it was CerSci Therapeutics. CerSci was a part of the origin of work done at our Center for Advanced Pain Studies, and Ted Price and Dr. Ted Price and Greg Dussar are the sort of the co-leads of that lab. And the company was founded and then venture backed through a couple of rounds of funding, led by a young man named Lucas Rodriguez, who's probably not so young anymore, but still young by my standards. And they had an exit event that they announced for their non-opioid pain treatment as they've been progressing through the cycle, where they were acquired by a publicly traded company with, if they hit all the sort of perfect markers through the next couple of years as they take their drugs through to the very end of the cycle, in a deal that's worth just shy of $1 billion. So a real range of activity and a bunch of resources at the university here at UT Dallas to assist a venture founder, whether they be a student and working them all the way through the early cycles of a pitch development, to a researcher and going through the commercialization activity to ultimately create a company and spin that company out and have that company acquired. So real range of activities.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So let's.
And I think that's oh, sorry. Just I was going to say, and one thing, Steve mentioned a little bit about the different offerings at UT Dallas for that educational component of this and learning how to be an entrepreneur. And in my 18 months back, that's been one of the things I've been so impressed by is the breadth of the work going on at UT Dallas. And we've been working hard to plug into that so we can leverage those type of things as well. But that early education that teaches you how to overcome failure and how to maybe predict those tough places and then have plans around them. The work that's being done at UT Dallas is just fantastic. Great resource for the region.
Agree. So I want to swing over a little bit into that to do our name of the session justice. So maybe each of you, and I'll start off, pinch it a little bit too for the places that aren't here today, but explain a little bit of how and what kind of entrepreneurial support you currently have or planning to have, both internally for students or faculty, and also in which ways that can be taken advantage of externally. And I'll just lead with this. Most of you know that are on the call know Help Wildcatters. We have a facility in downtown. Well, it turns out that you can do a lot of things without a facility these days. It is a 17,000 square foot office, collaborative office. Turns out quite COVID compliant. We started measuring the distances. We're pretty loose. We never were built to be a dense co-working place. But in any case, it turns out it's about the people, right? Yes, having some bricks and mortars is important, but ultimately it's the people that do the work there. And so some of the things that are going on here are, of course, our accelerator program, which is accessible to anyone that people apply to throughout the year. Educational series that are a monthly breakfast and lunches that either bring a healthcare entrepreneur here that talks about his or her success, or someone that demystifies an area of service providers that, how do I talk to an accountant that might be important for my venture? So kind of basic things as well. Then we organize hackathons and participate in a variety of other events that either we organize or we collaborate with others. But points being that there's quite a bit of interactivity in our facility. So we're not affiliated with a university. We're just an independent entity. We have office space as well. So some of the startups that are here in our facility are graduates of our accelerator program, others are not. And then filling in for, let's say, UTA and UNT to start with, and maybe SMU as well. I've seen innovation come out of those here in Dallas as well. They each have certain strengths, but certainly all of them have credible efforts in the healthcare space, especially UNT and UTA. I've seen innovation come out of and be commercialized, so they're great assets for our region. And I know that in sometimes it's, for an outsider, hard to understand how you can interact with those places, but let me, for instance, mention Jennifer Ebinger at SMU. So she leads some of the innovation efforts at SMU. So she would be like an anchor at SMU that you could interact with. And in most universities, those three, to my best knowledge, interpret their support quite widely. You have to find some sort of connection within which you are tied to the university, whether it's the IP or you're working with students from there or faculty from there, something along those lines. So they have a variety of support systems. But now I'll shut up. That was just to cover those three that aren't here right now. So I can get over to ladies first. Maybe Claire, tell us a little bit about Southwestern and how one would interact with you. And I know there's a variety of things in the pipeline too. So you can just, the press release isn't out yet, and therefore you can't speak about it,
I'd like
or
to speak a little.
or
There's
tell us.
one press release that's been out. So, just to mention, go back to what you said about what we can do virtually, I do still think innovation is a full contact sport. And it's those connections with people, those collisions with people that really spark you to take it to that next level and to have the confidence to really go for it. So I think while we've all shown that we can work virtually, I do think there's a little something missing, the creativity that you get from interacting with other really clever, motivated, interesting people. So, I'm not looking forward to a world where everything is virtual. But as far as entrepreneurship and UT Southwestern, we have an office that manages all the intellectual property that's being developed at UT Southwestern. And that's everything from your traditional small molecules to medical devices to software platforms, some that don't even really have a healthcare focus. They're more of like a business process. That's something we've recently been talking with one of our business units, that they've developed a software platform that could have potential in other places. So, our office handles all of that. And so if you were interested in working with our office, you could connect with me or our business development team. It's headed by George Goodnow and Supriya Sinha and Marisa Naughton, and they're all in the chat. So you could connect with them and you could learn about the different technologies that we have and what problems that we think those technologies might be solving in the marketplace. We're also recognizing that need for that training, that education. One of the things we see in healthcare a lot is the solution. Somebody will come to our office or have an idea for a solution, but when you start to do the customer discovery and you start to say, who would use this? How much would they pay for it? How would you get adoption? It really, your idea may change very dramatically. So what we want to do is to put in more programs that will allow our scientists, our postdocs, to start to go through that process and understand, like, I think this would solve this problem, but let me go talk to people who would actually use it. Let me understand what the business model is. Maybe, what I've got is way too expensive and our healthcare system wouldn't be able to absorb it. Or maybe it would require, like I said, a lot of new equipment in the surgical suite, and that would make this cost prohibitive, even if my solution is very cheap. So we are working at launching a number of entrepreneurial programs. UT Dallas really led the way, but we'll be launching a Blackstone Launchpad to provide a lot of that education. And the most exciting thing we have going on, and you've perhaps seen a few of the articles about this, is we are working with the Pegasus Park project. And that is the old ExxonMobil headquarters is being reimagined as an innovation hub, both for scientific and social innovation. So there'll be a biotech incubator there that will allow for wet lab space at a cost-effective rate and shared equipment, so that if you're trying to start a new company, you don't have to spend the bulk of your early dollars into just outfitting your lab before you even know if there's anything there. So what we really want to do, and a lot of this was influenced with time spent in the investment world, where when we invested in an early stage company, what we really wanted those early dollars to go to was, is there anything there? We need to validate the science. We need to de-risk the science. We need to take it a little bit farther. We don't want that money going to building out labs when we don't know if there's anything there. So how do we create an environment where we can de-risk those opportunities slowly and steadily, but not with a lot of capital expenditure up front? So, so that biotech incubator will be very closely aligned with UT Southwestern, and we'll be able to support that and also provide access to some of the core facilities at UT Southwestern, for example. So that's probably the most exciting thing. That will have a lot of programming associated with it. We will be starting a cohort this October for early companies to go through kind of a little bit of a boot camp, for lack of a better word, that we're working with a national partner on. So we're very excited to start to bring that mindset to campus. That's something that we have not traditionally had as an institution, because we're an academic medical center. We don't have a business school. we don't even have an undergrad. So there's a lot that we're missing from that perspective. And so in addition to trying to grow some of our own, we're working on extending our reach to places like UT Dallas, where we can leverage things they've already built so that we can partner with them, extend their reach, as well as get the benefit of their experience.
Excellent. Good. Well, I think that's gives a little bit of an overview of what's also coming, without saying too much. But thank you for sharing that. Steve, tell us a little bit about interactions on campus for entrepreneurs. You're muted.
Thank you. Yeah, I just put a little something, a link in the chat, a couple of links actually to take a look at. Probably the two ways that healthcare or life sciences startup ideas get generated are through these two routes. The first one, the innovation website, is kind of the source for what you might consider to be sort of all student academic related startup ideas. And we talk about being the place for the next generation's new ventures quite seriously. It's our role, as we see it, is to both enable the next generation of people, our student body, and our researchers to be the creators of products and services in the future, and also to be creating those next generation solutions, whatever those might be. So intentional sort of double meaning. But the ideas at UT Dallas can either start from student and academic related activity, or they can really be inspired by researchers working with industry, and that's really what the second link is all about. And if you go to that link, you'll see that's really where you would observe the things that when people talk about working with universities, you run into, which are sort of the whole technology transfer cycle of the university working as a liaison for our faculty inventors and working with them to be able to package their technology in a way so that it can be introduced and made available to industry. And industry could be large enterprises or could be startup ventures. So industry could be any commercial venture of any kind. And to facilitate all that activity, we've cultivated a UT Dallas ecosystem, and that's kind of at our core. And then we connect to all the other ecosystem players in the Dallas region, Dallas-Fort Worth region, and then in Texas. We really see our role as a Texas organization working alongside the centers of activity in healthcare and life sciences, and whether it be the Houston, Texas Medical Center area, or UTSA, or Austin, Texas, or any of the other resources, Texas Tech and beyond. We try and tie into all of those. Within UT Dallas, the last thing I'll say is, in addition to the academic programs, we have co-working and acceleration activities. So we've got, as Claire mentioned, we have a Blackstone Launchpad location for events and co-working activities. We have a dedicated office space, not unlike the WeWorks and Common Desks and Capital Factories of the world, that you can basically have a specific office or cube or a set of those for kind of your early days, and have a physical address that you can go to. We have a seed fund that we use to kind of kickstart ventures that are UT Dallas affiliated, and other resources as well. So we worked really hard to create a core set available to our faculty, staff, and alumni and students, to get them kind of pushed off from whatever their life sciences or medical device discipline might be, and then really to connect them to whether it's academic partners like Claire, or, as you know, Hubert, private sector industry partners like Health Wildcatters, to get them connected to those groups, mentors and investors that we think will help them the most. So we're very mindful that we have a role within the community, but to be very participating in the whole community. So happy to connect and talk with anyone. And by the way, besides the contacts that you have at those web links that I provided, you can also reach me at steveg@utdallas.edu. I see some email contacts in the chat, and so I'm easy to reach as well. So happy to connect you to whoever you'd like to answer a question, including the question that just came to me about connecting as a current student. Just send me an email at steveg@utdallas.edu, and I will help you there.
I definitely need to get a cooler UT Southwestern address. First name, not last name. I need there's Claire A is nowhere near as cool as Steve G, but
well,
work on that.
I don't know about that.
If you want, put your email address in the chat, both of you.
Sure.
Or don't, or have. I know, Claire, in your case, we've got several people on your team who've made their emails available. But
I'll do one better. I'll put my URL in there.
Oh my gosh. This is what IT entrepreneurs are able to do.
Yeah.
Okay, we have a couple of questions, so we're gonna switch over. So Eva Hebron from Ernst & Young is asking about CPRIT, and specifically she's observed that there seems to be more CPRIT activity recently in the Dallas region, and whether that's a new thing or not. From my observation, there's always been, I think that the changes are more like this CPRIT activity, which had its ups and downs. There used to be quite a bit of funding, then a lot of the commercial funding went away. UT Southwestern got a lot of support for faculty. It seems like we're back to getting what CPRIT really, in my view, what was special about it was to take some of that early stage risk funding in cancer research. But I'll defer to both of you. I don't know, do you have some sort of a macro view of, is there more Dallas CPRIT funding? Or
well, Claire will be more informed about it, but my general observation is that it's a little bit of both. There's the reauthorization, so there's funding available. I know UT Dallas has had awards in addition to the awards at UT Southwestern and the others in our community, so that's been good. But so we hit a good moment, but I also think intentionally we have more resources and more available to offer too. We kind of have, we're coming out a little more than we maybe had before, and so it just feels to me like we've got more to offer in Texas. So I think it's a little bit of both that's going on. Claire, what do you think?
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. One of the things I see is that we're finally starting to see some of the fruits of that early investment in the research. And so a lot of those early, the first, say, 5 to 8 years money that came in for that basic research or maybe even some translational research, that work has now gotten to a point at UT Dallas, UT Southwestern, other institutions, that it's ready to come off campus. So I think that's something that we're seeing. I think we're also seeing the maturing a little bit of our ecosystem. I think for a long time, our ecosystem lagged behind the Houston ecosystem. We still have a lot of room for growth. One of the things we like to say is one of the upsides of being last to the party is that we know a lot of the things that don't work, and so we know what not to do. But our ecosystem is starting to mature. We've had more of these successful exits in our region, and so there's more of a critical mass of entrepreneurs and funders willing to get behind those companies and keep them here in the region.
And I'd say, to some extent, we're also seeing each of us maybe play to some of our increasing strengths, whether it's UNT or UTA or you guys at Southwestern. In our case, a number of people know this, but it's still a little bit of a surprise when I mention it. We're UT Dallas has the 3rd largest computer science program in the nation. It's a huge computer science program. And and that doesn't include, 1,000 students in the supply chain logistics and data analytics programs in our business school. So, so on the computer science side, we're top ranked in AI, machine learning, cyber, and so especially with CPRIT related grants being made in areas where you're seeing an intersection of computer science related technology with maybe imaging, with maybe some sort of diagnostic component associated with cancer, that plays to a strength that, you know, an institution like ours would have. And just as, you know, similarly, the UT Arlington would be in a different area potentially, and same for Southwestern. So there's, as we grow our programs and capability and our research folks and capability, I think we're going to see more of that happening too.
Well, and that reminds me of MedCognetics, which I think is such a great example of UT Dallas's expertise in AI. And MedCognetics is a UT Dallas startup that we've been able to engage with at UT Southwestern. They've got an AI platform around image analysis. It has other applications, but they're going first with image analysis. And one of the things UT Southwestern has is images. And so we've partnered in a way that allows them to train their algorithm on our bank of images so that their product is better. We're able to change healthcare for the good, for, you know, what we have in our, you know, in our portfolio of assets. You know, this isn't really intellectual property, it's more data, but to do it in a HIPAA compliant fashion, in a way that works well for really taking the strengths of both institutions and keeping at the forefront, how do we improve healthcare?
Yeah, it's a good example of collaboration there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a good example. I'm glad I know it was in my notes here to bring up. I'm glad it got it out on its own. I think I want to echo the sentiment on that first wave of activity. One of the questions that always comes up: COVID, how is it affecting things? And my quick answer to that is, in healthcare, it put a magnifying glass on healthcare as an investment. Obviously not uniformly in every single aspect, but it certainly brought it up to the attention of people. Having some successes is important for a region to have. We just had our own first IPO on NASDAQ for one of our startups, and it is an event. I mean, you could say, okay, well, you've had other exits. Yeah, we've had other exits, but an IPO at that level on NASDAQ gets everyone's attention, and it returns capital to your early funders. And here's the thing that I want to say to that. You might say, oh, well, then now they have money and now they can invest more money. That's true. But I think more importantly, it establishes the fact that it can be done in a credible fashion with true first-rate results right here in Dallas, Texas, and beyond. So while that's something that investors are used to on the coast, the pathway to go to a successful acquisition, or the type of ventures that you've mentioned, Claire, and you, Steve, that have brought true billion-dollar, returns or have the potential to. For us, it's the same thing. Our investors obviously have believed in us for a long time, and it's a long game when you go early before a seed investor goes in. But seeing those returns, and in our case, having the IPO from Lantern, just is enough for someone to say, you know what, I want to invest in healthcare. I think it's not just the right thing to do. It's an area where I think I can make a difference, both with my knowledge or the assets we have here. But it's enough for me to at least know. And I would say it's less so the actual dollar that gets returned. It's more so the knowledge that these things can go. And so I feel like there's definitely a change in sentiment in a lot of regards in our region with respect.
I hope to say we have an opportunity to improve incomes and outcomes.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'd like to just quickly answer this question about the diversity of the data sets specifically. One of the things, we've been working in this space in the region for a long time, trying to understand what's Dallas's place what's North Texas's place in this healthcare ecosystem. And to be very frank, one of the strengths we have, especially over the hubs, is the diversity. And so at UT Southwestern, for example, because our clinicians also serve Parkland, also serve Children's, and we have some relationships with some community hospitals, we have been very intentional to make sure that our data sets are very diverse. And that's something we can offer the industry that other hubs can't, because they don't have the same diversity in their population that we have, and they don't have that same connectivity. what we've often thought of as a negative, that we have one county hospital and one medical center. When you compare that to Boston or even Houston or San Francisco and their multitude of providers in the healthcare system, that actually now let's turn it on our head and make it a positive and say, actually, all of our data is aggregated. And so now that we're in this time where that data has a way to actually change healthcare, we have an opportunity to take a leading role, especially with regard to diversity.
That's a very good point. I think that's been the one question that comes up often. And our distributed region has always been called out as a challenge, and we know it is. I think currently is exhibit A of that. Every single one is in the same boat, meaning whether you are in a dense populated area where you're 2 buildings over, you still don't visit in person, or you're in Dallas where you can take a meeting in Denton and McKinney and Fort Worth and Dallas. And collaborate that way. So it's flattening things in a way that's interesting and certainly not the way we had planned to, but certainly underscores that there is collaboration in this region that is a strength, and that's going to continue to be the case as the region fills in, right? So because our density is increase some as well. Steve?
Yeah, I think so. One of I like that flattening metaphor. Another one that I've used, I believe not originally, I've heard other folks mention this, is that part of what COVID has done is accelerate certain things that would already happen and probably would have happened anyhow. And so, if you're a startup and
perhaps
we're kind of
would have happened much more reluctantly.
Perhaps so. But nonetheless, one sort of rides the wave. And I think that, in some cases, companies that were struggling, kind of just getting by with their investors or with kind of their proof of their revenue traction, maybe went away faster. Others that there was a transition occurring, like, for example, people have been talking about the move to virtual education for a long, long time, and virtual meetings and conferences. And here we are, and we've discovered ways to do it. And some still doing it poorly, but others doing it well. And the occurrence of platforms like this and Zoom and others. So, we're seeing, acceleration in some of that regards, and that's been, I think, a valuable thing for us. I know in our case, one last sort of example of the filling in that you mentioned, Hubert, is again, the various institutions that are distant from each other. I'll offer are working together from a virtual mentoring perspective. Southwestern and us and Arlington and are all working together in a virtual mentoring service, a venture mentoring service for North Texas. So any venture that comes out of our institutions is getting sort of this virtual advisory board assistance that we're all pooling our resources to put on. So I think you'll just see more and more of that. Last thing I'll say, I'll be real curious. Actually, it's almost a question for you all if we run out of questions. There's been so much money available from poured into COVID from the federal government, from the defense, what have you, that'll be really interesting to see how long this runs over time and pays back or not. Hopefully we use it wisely over time and it kind of has a New Deal effect, 5, 10, 20 years from now. I'll be really interested to see if that is the case, because we're still early, right? 6 months in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think somebody mentioned telemedicine. I was going to say that. Maya Atrocity talks about telemedicine, and that's an example. And in healthcare, it's one you can't ignore because it speaks to your point, Claire. It's been around forever. The biggest telemedicine company was founded right here in Dallas, Texas. The founder was on our Zoom call yesterday as part of Dallas Startup Week. And yet Teladoc and others have had a slow adoption curve. Well, that was annihilated come March and following months when the the ratio of physicians that ever had done a telemedicine call was somewhere around 40% prior, instantly became 100%. I mean, almost every single one. Now, on the patient side, it was still lagging a little bit. People were putting appointments off, but eventually everyone there too will do it. And so it wasn't a function of not being available. It was just a function of being the new normal. And I think Zoom calls are the same way, right? It was
Right.
a secondary device to be on a Zoom call. I'd rather meet in person. That brings then up, what's the barrier for a regional meeting or a face-to-face meeting? Well, now I got to travel. Well, on our side, with our mentors, for instance, it means that if Zoom is normal, and my mentor in Minneapolis, my mentor in upstate New York, my mentor in San Francisco is available now and can be brought into the fold as a complete normal member, because he or she is doing the exact same thing. Everyone's doing that in Frisco and Fort Worth, not coming into the office, taking the mentor meeting via Zoom, and that being a normal thing. So it's another one of these flattenings that happens. And as an entrepreneur, we always have to look at the positives, right? So I've eked that one out as a positive. A lot more mentors I can get to take mentor meetings.
Well, and I think of it too from the, again, what we have as an opportunity is we now have an opportunity to drive that kind of innovation into areas that would not normally, rural areas, for example. So, now we have an opportunity because the adoption of technology has had to accelerate. And so if we can now change the quality of care being delivered in a rural community, then we can start to really make an impact on our patient health.
Agreed. So we're bumping up against 11:20. At 11:25, we have a hard cutoff because I need to start the next healthcare session. So as far as questions, we had one more question from Jill Salazar. And Jill asked, clinician entrepreneurs tend to have ideas in the medical device realm. However, most successful commercialized tech these days is in nano software and so on. Is there a future in device startups, or should clinicians begin to adjust the focus of their development technology? I don't know if either of the two of you wants to touch that.
I would just land on that word I used a minute ago. I think it's accelerating. I mean, I saw, as probably many people on the call did, a proof of concept. Might have been earlier this week. What is today? Tuesday? Might have been yesterday. Where there were nano bots with a new actuator technology that were proved out and injected, invisible to the eye, but inject 1,000 of them injected, and then to operate, to activate inside the human body. So all kinds of amazing nano accelerating in many different ways.
And I think you still have to get back to what problem are you solving? What is the size of that problem? Who's going to pay for it? Who do you need to convince to use it? And if that is still a meaningful commercial opportunity, then any solution to it is one you should pursue.
Well, I'll leave you each anything you want to mention, open mic. You want to mention anything else? You got 60, 90 seconds to accentuate a point or leave us with any parting words.
I'll put a plug in for Hubert. Your founder stories at Health Wildcatters, the Pulse Breakfast, are fantastic. So anybody that hasn't been to one of Health Wildcatters Pulse Breakfast, go.
And I'd just like to put a plug in for our whole community. I think we're coming together in a way that we, haven't really done in the past. UT Southwestern is so excited to be part of our entrepreneurial community, which we've never really, jumped in with both feet. I love the partnerships that we're building with Health Wildcatters, with UT Dallas, with UT Arlington, with our entire community.
Great. Well, somebody did ask whether this recording is going to be available. The answer we procured, meanwhile, is, well, we know it's being recorded. There's a little red button at the top. So the answer, and it will be released on a YouTube channel, but this is in the Dallas Startup Week realm, so we don't know the exact time or date when this will happen yet. But we believe all these sessions will be available. So keep in touch with us or email us if you want to know more. But I would say it's very likely that at the end of the week, those will start becoming available on the DSW YouTube channel. For me, it's just enough time to thank everyone for attending and for all your great questions. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Claire, for making time available to talk about Dallas startups and how people can access you, and also talking about other potential resources, the great progress that's been made in the last few years. It's a particular pleasure for me to have both of you at the helm or at the figureheads at the respective institutions. There's a ton of good stuff happening both at yours and as well as UNT, UTA, SMU, and beyond. And so it's exciting times. And it was great to have both of you on here this morning. Our next session will be in 5 minutes. It will be startup law and healthcare law. Adam Hall and Matt Lipton as the two panelists. That will be the last session of the healthcare track. For me, remains to wish you a great rest of the morning. Join us in the other session if you have time. Thank you both again for making yourselves available.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Hubert, and thanks to everyone who joined.
Come visit us. Bye.